Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. Choices about children, the ethics of procreation, parenting, and education is a workshop of philosophers to examine how families, schools, and societies negotiate the responsibility and expectation of raising children. So, although the title says choices about children, it is not clear whether it is going to be about having children to start with and then raising them or just about raising children. Anyway, this workshop is happening at the Center for Ethics at Toronto University on 10th of March at 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. local time. Good news about this is it will be live streamed on YouTube. I'll include its link in the description. An international conference is coming up from 8th to 10th of April at Aix-Marseille University in France about atheism and the meaning of life. Keynote speakers are many distinguished philosophers, including Thaddeus Metz, who has written about antinatalism in the past and has also edited the book Contemporary Antinatalism back in 2023. Ido Lando, who had appeared on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, will also be speaking on the third day about mysticism and meaning of life. But I think the most direct talk on antinatalism will be on 9th April by the antinatalist philosopher Sarah Diarna, who will be speaking about Zapffe and antinatalism in the age of theistic decline. I am still trying to find out whether this conference will be recorded so that we can know what was being said. Life is designed for suffering. Antinatalism is the answer is a new book on antinatalism by Chua Ping Ping. Chua, I hope I'm saying the author's name right, comes from a banking background, so not a trained philosopher, but the book claims to be philosophical and the book is on the suffering in life. I could not find any reading sample or abstract to it, but I have ordered this book on Amazon, so let's see when I get it. Emil P. Torres has written an article on their Substack, Making Sense of the Human Extinction Debate. It's a long article and they clarify a few of the terms used about extinction. One is going extinct or the process of becoming extinct versus the state of being extinct. Going extinct can have many different pathways as a means to extinction, and one of them could be antinatalism, that people either stop having children or phase out having children to the eventual extinction. But the state of being extinct is just a state of being extinct. Not everybody distinguishes between those two. Based on whether you distinguish between them or not, there are two views about extinction that Torres talks about. One is the equivalence view. On this view, you don't consider the state of being extinct as either good or bad or right or wrong. That's because in the state of being extinct, there is nobody who could be harmed and there is nobody who could be said to be benefited from this state. So, whatever extinction we would be talking about would be about the process of going extinct itself. On this view, the badness or wrongness of human extinction is equivalent to the badness or wrongness of going extinct. Another view is called further loss view. On this view, if we go extinct, that is, the state of being extinct is regarded as bad or harmful because it would deprive a lot of future generations from either the pleasures of life or achieving the value in utilitarian terms, values of like science, art, music, and so on. To distinguish between these two views, Torres presents a thought experiment. Consider two worlds, World A and World B. World A has a total population of 11 billion. World B has a total population of 10 billion people. Now consider that someone kills 10 billion people in each world. They kill 10 billion in the world A, so only 1 billion people remain. They also kill 10 billion people in the world B, and that causes human extinction in that world. If you are an equivalence theorist, then you would think that the act of killing 10 billion people is bad, but in both the worlds, there is nothing more bad happening. That's because even though humans go extinct in world B, you don't think that the state of being extinct as being bad. But if you are a further loss theorist, then you think that killing 10 billion people in each world is bad, but on top of that bad, there's some extra bad that happened to world B because there are no humans left to carry on the values. like science, art, music, and so on. Whereas in the world A, there are at least 1 billion people who can still propagate those values to the future generations. Here's another chart which shows the equivalence view. X-axis shows the number of deaths happening and y-axis shows the corresponding badness because of those number of deaths. As you can see, the badness increases as more and more people die. But once all people are dead, there is no more increase in badness because the human extinction has occurred, and so now there is a plateau in badness because on equivalence view, the state of being extinct is not bad. Contrast that to further loss theory. As you can see on this chart, that once humans have gone extinct, the state of being extinct becomes infinitely bad all of a sudden because there is no chance of having a future generation to carry on the values. Torres also talks about two terms used ambiguously in the context of human extinction. One is, what does it mean when we say human? We generally think human as a member of the species Homo sapiens, but that's a narrow definition of human. On a broader definition, it could also be someone who is our descendant, who carries our values, maybe who is also conscious, but not necessarily the biological human or the member of the species Homo sapiens. It could be the member of some other species in the future, a technological being like AGI, or a combination of these two things. This Torres calls the post-human, and the broad definition of human would consider these post-humans also as part of humanity. Now, based on this distinction, there could be two different extinctions. On the narrow definition, where human means only the member of the species Homo sapiens, extinction is simple. Once they are all gone, they are all gone. But on the broader definition, things are a little different. All members of the species Homo sapiens might disappear in the future, which Torres calls as terminal extinction. But there might be a chance that there could be some other descendants of us living in future. So on this definition, it could happen that Homo sapiens have gone extinct, but their descendants are alive. If they also go, then it could be another event of extinction, which Torres calls as final extinction. Torres also accuses some other philosophers like long-termists who actually want to have terminal extinction but not final extinction. The article is only about extinction, and some might argue that it is not necessarily about antinatalism, and that I think is true. We are talking about a species going extinct versus not starting a new life. But extinction is an important concern of antinatalism, and that is why David Benatar had to dedicate a whole chapter on this subject in Better Never to Have Been. And so, even though the article is not talking about having children or bringing new sentient beings into existence, I think knowing about different views of extinction is valuable. On to some notable videos, and we have 4 this week. Lawrence interviewed David Benatar about his new book, Living with Adversity. It's not a book that David wrote himself. I mean, he wrote introduction to the book, but the book is mainly a collection of 18 personal accounts of people living with adversities. Adversities like diseases, disabilities, injustices, isolation, philosophical isolation, public shame, and so on. In the interview, they talk about all these kinds of adversities as well as the process of editing the book and how Benatar sought these essays from different authors and what was the main motivation of this book. And just a spoiler alert, it was not intended as a book originally. Very little antinatalism is talked about, but this is interview of David Benatar, and some of the authors are antinatalists. Others are not antinatalists even after living through such adversities. No Nonsense Spirituality is a channel by Britt Hartley, which has more than 70,000 subscribers, and she made a video talking about Peter Wiesel-Zapfe and his philosophy titled Existential Elk, When Awareness Becomes a Curse. So, of course, if you know Zapfe, you would also know that he compared human consciousness to the overgrown antlers of the now extinct Irish elk. Those overgrown antlers were in some way a reason for those elks to go extinct, and this overgrown human consciousness is also the reason for causing a lot of suffering to humans. Now, it's too late for those elks to shed off their antlers, but we can and do trim our human consciousness. And Zapfe observed 4 mechanisms through which we do that. 1 is isolation, 2 is distraction, 3 anchoring, and 4th is sublimation. Hartley in her video explains all these 4 mechanisms. One thing to note is that these are mechanisms for already existing people to cope with the suffering by looking at the reality that they live in. But they cannot form justification to start a new life, and that is why Peter Wiesel never had any children. And Britt Hartley in this video explains that she also is an antinatalist and has adopted 4 children for this reason. So kudos to Hartley for doing what she's doing. This is an absolutely remarkable job that she's doing. Now, the video itself does not clearly distinguish between psychology and philosophy, or psychological mechanisms and philosophical arguments. Maybe this is on purpose. Maybe this is why videos like this become appealing to people. I don't know the reason behind that, but that is what I observed. Overall, a very good half an hour video to listen to. The Dissenter interviewed Dr. Theresa Baron mainly about her book published by Cambridge Elements, The Artificial Womb on Trial in the Elements of Bioethics and Neuroethics. So, of course, a lot of discussion went around technological advancements in artificial womb making. For anybody interested, we come to know a lot about what's happening in that world, especially that we are trying to burn the candle from both ends. Meaning, if you consider the period of gestation, then there is IVF technology, which is helping couples to have children. But in doing so, they are creating embryos outside the womb. And there is a push, at least in some circles, to extend how long those embryos can remain outside the womb. On the other hand, for babies which are born prematurely, there are technologies like incubation chambers, and babies do come out of their mother's womb earlier than they used to. This incubation technology is helping to raise fetuses or babies outside the womb as long as possible. So, the technology is helping to keep the child outside of its mother as much as possible from both ends of the gestation period. The hope is these two will eventually meet and we would have artificial wombs where babies are created outside for the entire period of gestation. Now, there are many problems in this technology. There are technical problems as to how to do it, but there are also ethical problems of how to implement this technology, and there are ethical problems of whether we should even have this sort of technology in the first place. All of these problems are discussed in the interview, so it becomes very interesting. One thing to note is that Dr. Baron brings out the ethical problem of creating new persons as a means for scientific research. And she says that the answer is not straightforward yes. We have to think it properly, and it is more problematic. So she recognizes the ethical problem of creating people as a means, at least for one reason, which is scientific research. But there are other reasons for which we create new people just as a means, and that involves even conventional pregnancies and procreation. Ricardo, who is the anchor of the Dissenter channel, touches on this point a little at the end of this interview. His point is more towards antinatalism, but Dr. Baron does not fully address that. Still a nice interview to listen to. Now, we have a big news from Amanda Suknik. On her Exploring Antinatalism podcast channel, she posted a video talking about her upcoming thesis at the University of Chicago, Beyond Sentiocentric Antinatalism, Needians and the End of Our Life. It's only a 5-minute video, but her point is that Benatar's antinatalism is theory neutral. Benatar has said this in many interviews in the past, that his version of antinatalism does not follow any certain theory of normative ethics. And so Amanda is expanding the scope of antinatalism in 2 directions. One, she is trying to include non-sentient beings into antinatalism, and 2, she is also trying to expand antinatalism into virtue ethics or flourishing as Aristotelian or neo-Aristotelian ethics demand. I'm not entirely sure why we should look at non-sentient beings, but we will see what Amanda comes with. And those were the updates of antinatalism this week. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.